Commander Daeho Kim stood at the wide window of the space station, watching Earth turn slowly below. The blue planet looked peaceful from up here. No wars, no hunger, no problems. Just a beautiful world spinning in the darkness. He had no idea that in 10 minutes everything would change forever. The communication panel behind him started beeping. Not the usual soft tone for regular messages, but the sharp, urgent sound that meant emergency. Daeho turned around and pressed the answer button. Commander Kim here. The screen flickered, then showed a face that made Daeho's blood run cold. It was Veltar, the head of the Galactic Council. The alien looked like a tall human made of blue crystal, with eyes that glowed white. When Veltar spoke to humans, it was never good news. Commander Kim, Veltar said. His voice sounded like glass breaking. I bring urgent news for your species. The Devourers have awakened. Daeho felt his heart skip. Everyone in the galaxy knew about the Devourers, but they were supposed to be sleeping. They were ancient machines that ate everything, planets, stars, entire solar systems. They had been quiet for thousands of years. Most people thought they were just scary stories. Are you sure? Daeho asked. Very sure, Veltar replied. They have already destroyed 17 star systems in the outer rim. They are moving toward the center of the galaxy, toward Earth. Dr. Sujin Park rushed into the room. She was the best scientist on the station, and she could read alien languages better than anyone. She had been listening to the emergency broadcasts from across the galaxy. Commander, she said, breathing hard. I've been tracking the reports. It's worse than we thought. The Devourers aren't just destroying things. They're eating everything and turning it into more of themselves. They're getting bigger and stronger with every planet they consume. Veltar nodded. Dr. Park is correct. The Devourers grow more powerful with each victory. This is why the Galactic Council has made a decision. All species must evacuate to the Andromeda Galaxy immediately. Daeho felt hope rise in his chest. When do the evacuation ships arrive for Earth? There was a long pause. Veltar asked, glowing. Eyes seemed to dim. I'm afraid you misunderstand, Commander. The evacuation is only for essential species. Humanity is too young, too small, and too primitive to justify the resources required for evacuation. The words hit Daeho like a physical blow. What are you saying? I'm saying that humanity will remain in this galaxy. You will face the Devourers alone. Dr. Park stepped forward, her face pale. That's a death sentence. You're abandoning us. The decision has been made, Veltar said. The Vorthek, with their crystal technology, will survive. The Luminari, who can travel as pure energy, will endure. The Nexari, with their advanced cybernetics, will adapt, but humans ... Humans are biological. Weak, slow, you cannot run fast enough or fight hard enough to matter. Daeho's hands clenched into fists. We helped you fight the Zephyr Wars. We shared our medicine when the plague hit the outer colonies. We've been good allies. And we are grateful, Veltar said, but his tone was cold. However, gratitude cannot change reality. The evacuation ships can only carry so many. We must save those who can help rebuild civilization in Andromeda. Humanity cannot contribute enough to justify the cost. How long do we have? Dr. Park asked quietly. The Devourers move slowly but steadily. Based on their current path, they will reach your solar system in approximately 18 months. I suggest you use this time to make peace with your fate. The screen went black. Daeho and Dr. Park stood in silence, staring at the empty display. 18 months, Dr. Park whispered. They're really going to leave us here to die, Daeho said. Dr. Park walked to her computer and began typing rapidly. I need to see the data they sent. Maybe there's something they missed. Some weakness in the Devourers that we can exploit. Sujin, Daeho said gently. These things destroyed civilizations that are thousands of years more advanced than us. What can we possibly do? She looked up at him with fierce determination. I don't know yet. But I'm not going to sit here and wait to die. The next few hours were chaos. Word of the abandonment spread quickly through the station and down to Earth. Captain Ji-Woo Lee arrived from her patrol ship, demanding to know if the reports were true. Admiral Hai-Wan Jang called an emergency meeting of all military commanders. President Min-Ho Choi tried to contact other alien leaders, hoping someone would help, but every response was the same. Humanity was on its own. Dr. Park worked through the night, studying everything the aliens had shared about the Devourers. The machines were massive, some as big as moons. They moved through space slowly but destroyed everything in their path. They seemed to learn from each battle, getting smarter and more efficient. "Look at this," she said to Daeho as dawn broke over Earth below. "The Devourers have fought dozens of different species. Each time they adapt their tactics. But every species they've faced has used similar strategies, logical, predictable military formations. So maybe that's the problem. Maybe the Devourers are good at fighting predictable enemies. But humans... we're not always logical." Daeho raised an eyebrow. "You think our biggest weakness might be our strength? Maybe. Look at human history. We've won battles we should have lost by doing crazy, unexpected things. The Devourers are machines. They think like machines." "But we don't." Captain Lee burst into the room. "Commander, I just got word from Earth Command. They want all ships to return home immediately for final preparations." "What kind of preparations?" Daeho asked. Lee's jaw was tight. "If we're going to die, we're going to make sure it costs them. Admiral Jang is mobilizing every ship we have. Military, civilian, cargo haulers, even the old museum pieces. If the Devourers want Earth, they're going to have to fight for it." Dr. Park looked up from her computer. "How many ships do we have total?" "About 3,000, Lee said. "Not counting the small fighters and shuttles." "The Vorthak had over 100,000 ships," Dr. Park said quietly. "The Devourers destroyed them in less than a week." The room fell silent. 3,000 ships against an enemy that had crushed forces 30 times larger. "Well," Daeho said finally, "I guess we better make those 3,000 ships count." Lee nodded grimly. "Admiral Jang is calling for volunteers. People who want to stay and fight instead of spending their last months in panic. Surprisingly, a lot of people are signing up." "Why surprisingly?" Dr. Park asked. "Because they know it's suicide," Lee replied, "but they're doing it anyway. They say if humanity is going to end, it should end fighting." Daeho looked out the window at Earth again. It still looked peaceful and beautiful. But now he knew that in 18 months, machines would come to tear it apart and eat everything on it. "You know what?" he said. "Maybe the aliens are right. Maybe we are too primitive and weak to matter. But maybe that's exactly why we're going to surprise them." Dr. Park smiled for the first time in hours. "You think we can actually win?" "I think we can make them remember us," Daeho said. "And maybe that's enough." The streets of Seoul were burning. President Min-Ho Choi watched from his office window as crowds of angry people threw rocks at alien embassy buildings. 3 days had passed since the galaxy abandoned humanity, and the riots were getting worse. "Sir," his aide said, running into the room, "the situation in New York is bad. People are attacking any alien they can find. The Luminary ambassador is requesting emergency evacuation." Min-Ho rubbed his tired eyes. He had not slept in 3 days. "Tell the ambassador that if his people wanted to be safe, they should not have left us here to die." "Sir, should I really say that?" "No," Min-Ho sighed. "Tell him we'll provide protection. We're better than they are." Admiral Hai-Wan Jang entered the office carrying a thick folder. Her face was grim. "Mr. President, I have the military assessment you requested. It's not good." She spread papers across his desk, numbers, charts, ship counts. All of it painted. The same picture. "Our entire fleet has 3,000 ships," she said. "Most of them are small patrol vessels or cargo ships we've converted. We have maybe 200 real warships. The Devourers destroyed the Vorthak fleet of 100,000 ships in 6 days. So we're outnumbered and outgunned," Min-Ho said. "It's worse than that," Admiral Jang continued. "The aliens have been fighting in space for thousands of years. They have weapons and shields we can't even understand. but the Devourers beat them easily. Our weapons are like throwing rocks at a tank. Minho stared at the numbers. Earth had 8 billion people. In 18 months, they would all be dead. Unless ... what about evacuation? He asked. Could we build our own ships to escape? Admiral Zhang shook her head. We don't have the technology or the time. Building a ship that could travel to Andromeda would take decades, even if we knew how. There was a knock at the door, Dr. Young-Soo. Nam entered looking excited despite the terrible situation. He was the head of the Terra Defense Initiative, the secret military research program. Mr. President, he said, I may have something. It's dangerous and completely insane, but it might work. I'm listening, Minho said. Dr. Nam pulled out a small device that looked like a metal cube. We call it Project Prometheus. It's based on quantum mechanics, the same science that powers alien technology, but we're using it differently. How differently? Admiral Zhang asked. Instead of trying to copy alien weapons, we're doing something they would never do. We're making weapons that are deliberately unstable. Weapons that break the rules of physics. Dr. Nam pressed a button on the cube. It began to glow with a strange light that hurt to look at. This is a quantum uncertainty bomb. When it explodes, it doesn't just destroy matter. It makes the laws of physics go crazy in a small area. Nothing can predict what will happen. Admiral Zhang frowned. That sounds incredibly dangerous. It is, Dr. Nam admitted. These weapons are so unstable that they might kill us just as easily as the enemy, but that's the point. The Devourers are machines. They think logically. They expect weapons to behave in predictable ways. These don't. How many can you make? Minho asked. That's the problem, Dr. Nam said, his excitement fading. Each one takes enormous amounts of energy to create. We could make maybe 50 or 60 before we run out of power. 50 weapons against millions of Devourers, Admiral Zhang said. It's not enough. Maybe it doesn't have to be, Dr. Nam said. I've been studying the alien reports. The Devourers work as a connected network. If we could disrupt that network, even briefly, it might give us an advantage. Minho looked at both of them. What do you need? Everything, Dr. Nam said. Every nuclear reactor on Earth, every solar panel, every generator. If we're going to build these weapons, we need to shut down half the planet's power grid. That will cause massive problems, Minho said. People will suffer. People are going to die anyway, Admiral Zhang said quietly. At least this way, they die fighting. Minho made his decision. Do it. Build your weapons. Build as many as you can. Dr. Nam nodded and left quickly. Admiral Zhang gathered her papers. There's something else, she said. Captain Jiwoo Lee has gone missing. Missing how? She was supposed to return to Earth with her ship. Instead, she's taken the Vestan Rising deep into alien space. Her last message said she was going to find out everything she could about the Devourers. Is that even possible? If anyone can do it, it's Lee. She's the best scout captain we have. But if the aliens catch her spying on them, ... Admiral Zhang didn't finish the sentence. Minho walked to the window again. The fires in Seoul were getting bigger. Admiral, what would you do if you were in my position? Honestly? I'd probably be in one of those crowds throwing rocks, she said. The aliens used us when they needed us. They took our technology, our resources, our help in their wars, and the moment things got dangerous, they abandoned us like we were nothing. But you're not in the crowd. You're here planning to fight, because someone has to, Admiral Zhang said. My daughter is 12 years old. If we're all going to die, I want her to know that her mother didn't give up, that humanity didn't just lie down and wait for the end. Meanwhile, in a secret laboratory deep beneath Seoul, Dr. Bio Rahan worked frantically on the Prometheus weapons. The quantum uncertainty technology was incredibly complex, but she was beginning to understand it. The key was chaos. Normal weapons tried to control energy and direct it precisely. These weapons did the opposite. They released energy in completely random ways, creating effects that even the people who built them couldn't predict. It's like fighting with lightning, she muttered to herself. You can't aim it, but you can point it in the right direction and hope for the best. Her assistant, Dr. Woo Jin Park, looked up from his calculations. But, I've been thinking about what Dr. Nam said. About the Devourers being logical. What if that's not entirely true? What do you mean? The reports say they adapt their tactics based on what they learn. But adaptation requires some level of creativity. Maybe they're not as predictable as we think. Laura stopped working. You saying our plan won't work? I'm saying maybe our plan will work better than we think. If the Devourers can learn and adapt, then they can also be confused and surprised. And if there's one thing humans are good at, it's being confusing and surprising. Across the galaxy, the great evacuation continued. Massive alien ships carried billions of refugees toward Andromeda. But some were beginning to have doubts. Keschel, an admiral in the Vorthak fleet, studied the reports from his crystal ship. The Devourers had destroyed his homeworld in 4 hours. His proud fleet, which had ruled space for millennia, had been crushed like insects. Admiral, his aide said, we're receiving human communication signals. Ignore them, Keschel said. Automatically, then he paused. What are they saying? They appear to be military preparations, sir. They're organizing their forces for battle. Keschel was confused. Battle? Against the Devourers? That's suicide. Yes, sir. But they're doing it anyway. The Crystal Admiral stared at the star. Charts. His people had run from the Devourers without even trying to fight. It was the logical thing to do. The smart thing. The thing that would let them survive, so why did he feel ashamed? Back on Earth, President Min-ho Choi prepared to address the world. In a few minutes, he would tell 8 billion people that they had been abandoned by their allies and would soon face an enemy they could not defeat, but he would also tell them something else. That humanity had never won a fight by being logical or smart or playing it safe. They had won by being stubborn, crazy, and too stupid to know when they were beaten. Mr. President, his aide said, the broadcast is ready. Min-ho straightened his jacket and walked to the podium. Behind him, Earth continued to turn, beautiful, blue, doomed. My fellow humans, he began, I will not lie to you. The situation is desperate. We have been abandoned by those we called friends. We face an enemy that has destroyed civilizations far more advanced than ours. By every logical measure, we cannot win. He paused, looking directly into the camera. But since when have humans ever cared about logic? Since when have we ever done the smart thing? We are the species that climbed mountains because they were there. We sailed into unknown oceans because we were curious. We flew to the moon because we could. His voice grew stronger. The aliens think we are weak because we are young. They think we are worthless because we are small. They think we will give up because we are outnumbered. He smiled, and it was not a nice smile. Let's show them how wrong they are. Captain Tae-young-roo gripped the controls of his ship as Jupiter grew larger on the screen. 3 months had passed since the galaxy abandoned humanity. 3 months of desperate preparation, and now the Devourers were here. Captain, his communications officer said, Admiral Jang is on the line. Put her through. Admiral Jang's face appeared on the main screen. Behind her, the lights of the command center flashed red battle stations. Captain Rue, long-range sensors show a single Devourer. Construct approaching Jupiter. It's the size of a small moon. Rue felt his stomach drop. Just one? Just one. But it's already started consuming Jupiter's moons. Europa is gone. Ganymede is half-eaten. At this rate, it will strip the entire system in days. Rue looked at his fleet, 200 ships. Most of them were converted cargo vessels and mining ships. The crews were brave, but they were not soldiers. They were farmers and engineers and teachers who had volunteered to fight because someone had to. What are our orders? He asked. Stop it, Admiral Jang said simply. However you can. The connection ended. Rue turned to his crew. They were all looking at him, waiting for orders that would probably get them all killed. All right, everyone, he said. You all know what we're facing. That thing out there destroyed civilizations that were thousands of years ahead of us. It has weapons we can't understand and armor we can't penetrate. He paused, looking at each face on his bridge, but it has never fought humans before. And humans do crazy things. Lieutenant So-Young Kim, his weapons officer, raised her hand. Captain, what exactly is the plan? Dr. Nam's quantum weapons are still experimental. We only have 3 of them in the entire fleet. So we're going to have to get creative. Rue brought up a tactical display. The Devourer construct looked like a giant metal spider with 1,000 legs. It was slowly tearing apart what was left of Ganymede, feeding the matter into its central core. The alien reports say Devourers are logical. They use efficient tactics and predictable strategies. So we're going to do everything wrong. We're going to be as unpredictable and chaotic as possible. Sir, his navigator asked, is that really a strategy? It's the only strategy we have. The human fleet spread out in a formation that would have made any military academy instructor horrified. Ships flew in random patterns, changing direction every few seconds. Some flew upside down, others spun as they moved. A few even flew backwards. The Devourer construct noticed them. Its massive form turned toward the approaching fleet, weapons beginning to glow with deadly energy. Here it comes, Rue muttered. The Devourer fired. Beams of pure destruction lanced out toward the human ships. But something strange happened. The random, chaotic flight patterns that looked so stupid actually worked. Most of the beams missed completely because the Devourer's targeting systems couldn't predict where the ships would be next. It's working, Lieutenant Kim shouted. The random movement is confusing its targeting. But even with the confusion, some ships were hit. The cargo hauler Daegu Hope exploded in a ball of fire. The mining vessel Byzant Dream broke apart. Its crew of 17 lost in seconds. Return fire. Rue ordered. The human weapons were pathetic compared to what they faced. Missiles bounced off the Devourer's armor like raindrops. Energy beams barely scratched its surface. But the humans kept firing anyway, swarming around the massive construct like angry bees. Captain, Lieutenant Kim said, our weapons aren't doing anything. Keep firing. We need to get its attention focused on us. Why? Because Captain Lee needs an opening. On the edge of the battle, Captain Min Jae Lee commanded a special strike team. His ship, the Soul Warrior, carried one of the 3 quantum uncertainty weapons. The plan was simple: get close enough to use it. Captain, his pilot said, the Devourer is focused on the main fleet. This is our chance, Lee nodded. Take us in, maximum stealth. The Soul Warrior crept closer to the massive construct. Up close, the Devourer was even more terrifying. Its surface crawled with millions of smaller machines, all working together like cells in a giant organism. Target the central core, Lee ordered, and pray this works. The quantum weapon fired. It looked like a bubble of twisted space that expanded outward from Lee's ship. When it hit the Devourer, reality went insane. For a few seconds, the laws of physics stopped working properly in that area. Gravity pointed sideways. Time moved in circles. Matter existed and didn't exist at the same time. The Devourer's logical systems couldn't process what was happening. Part of the construct simply vanished. Another part turned inside out. A section near the core began moving backwards through time. Direct hit, Lee's gunner shouted. We hurt it, but the weapon's effect only lasted a few seconds. When reality snapped back to normal, the Devourer was damaged but still functional. And now it was very, very angry. The construct turned all its weapons on the human fleet. This time, it didn't try to target efficiently. It just fired everything at once, filling space with deadly energy. Ships began dying by the dozens. The Incheon Pride was cut in half. The Gwangju spirit simply ceased to exist. Captain Rue watched his fleet being destroyed and realized they needed to do something even more desperate. All ships, he broadcast, Operation Suicide Run, ram the target. It was the most insane order in military history. But the humans did it anyway. The remaining ships accelerated toward the Devourer construct at maximum speed. They weren't trying to win anymore. They were just trying to hurt the enemy as much as possible before they died. The first ship to hit was the converted freighter Pohang Thunder. Its captain, Daewoo Park, managed to crash directly into one of the Devourer's weapon clusters. The explosion took out 3 of the construct's main guns. More ships followed. The Ulsan Lightning hit the sensor array. The Genju Hammer crashed into the propulsion system. Each impact did real damage because the Devourer's logical systems had never planned for enemies that would deliberately destroy themselves just to hurt it. Captain Ru was among the last. As his ship plunged toward the Devourer's core, he thought about his wife and daughter back on Earth. He thought about the aliens who had abandoned humanity. And he thought about how proud he was to be human. The Suons. Revenge hit the Devourer's central processing unit at nearly the speed of light. When the explosion stopped, only 12 human ships remained out of 200. But the Devourer construct was badly damaged. For the first time in its existence, it had been hurt by creatures it considered primitive and worthless. More importantly, it had learned something it didn't expect. These humans fought differently than any other species. They didn't follow logical tactics. They didn't try to preserve their forces. They seemed willing to die just to prove a point. The damaged construct slowly began to retreat toward the outer system. It needed time to repair and to process this new information. Back on Earth, Admiral Zhang received the battle report. 80% casualties. Nearly the entire fleet destroyed. By any measure, it was a devastating defeat. But for the first time since the Devourers appeared, one of their constructs had been forced to retreat. "Get me Dr. Park," Admiral Zhang ordered. When Dr. Sujin Park arrived at the command center, she found Admiral Zhang staring at a tactical display. "Doctor, I need you to analyze the battle data." The Devourer retreated. "Why?" Dr. Park studied the information for several minutes. "It's processing what happened," she said finally. "The construct is trying to understand how such primitive weapons could damage it, and it can't. The quantum weapon created effects that don't fit into its logical framework. The suicide attacks were completely irrational by its standards. It needs time to adapt its programming." Admiral Zhang felt a grim smile cross her face. "How much time? I don't know. But I don't think it expected to be confused by us. The Devourers have fought hundreds of species, but they've all used similar tactics, logical tactics. We're the first species crazy enough to ram our ships into them just to make a point. And that's an advantage? Maybe, if we can keep being unpredictable, we might be able to confuse them faster than they can adapt." Admiral Zhang looked at the star charts. More Devourer constructs were coming. Dozens of them. And humanity only had about 800 ships left. "Doctor," she said, "I hope you're right, because we're about to find out just how crazy humans can be." On the edge of the solar system, Captain Jiwoo Lee's ship, the Bizon Rising, drifted silently in space. She had been watching the battle through long-range sensors, gathering data on how the Devourers fought. What she saw gave her an idea. A terrible, dangerous, completely insane idea. "Set course for the asteroid belt," she ordered her crew. "We're going to teach these machines something they've never learned before." "What's that, Captain?" "That sometimes the best defense is to make the enemy so confused they can't think straight." The Bizon Rising disappeared into the darkness between the planets, carrying with it the hopes of a species that refused to die quietly. Major Janae Ko stared at the impossible readings on her screen. 6 months had passed since the first battle at Jupiter, and the war had become something that no military academy in the galaxy could have predicted. "Ma'am," her engineer said, "the engine modifications are complete? But I have to warn you, this is completely insane." Janae smiled. "Perfect. Insane is exactly what we need." She was standing in the engine room of the Mokpo Fury, one of 50 ships that had been modified, with what the crews called Ghost Protocol. The modifications were based on a discovery that Major Ko had made by accident during a battle with Devourer scouts near Mars. Her ship's engine had been damaged. Instead of shutting down, the broken engine created an unstable warp field that made her ship appear in multiple locations at once. The Devourers had fired at all the false images while her real ship escaped. Now, human engineers were deliberately damaging their own engines in very specific ways. It was dangerous. Some ships blew up during the modifications. But the ones that survived could confuse Devourer targeting systems so badly that the enemy machines sometimes stopped firing completely, unable to process what they were seeing. "All ships, this is Major KO," she broadcast to her squadron. "Remember, the goal isn't to win this battle. The goal is to make them so confused they can't think straight." Her 20 ships moved toward a group of Devourer constructs that were harvesting asteroids near Mars. The constructs were smaller than the one at Jupiter, only the size of buildings instead of moons. But there were dozens of them, and they were learning. The Devourers had adapted since Jupiter. They now used more random firing patterns to counter human unpredictability. They had developed new weapons specifically designed to deal with chaotic movement. They were getting smarter, but humans were getting crazier. "Ghost Protocol activate," Major KO ordered. 20 human ships suddenly became 200 on the Devourer's sensors. The constructs tried to target them all, but their weapons couldn't decide which images were real. Some fired at empty space. Others shot at each other by mistake. But the real surprise came when the Machpo Fury seemed to fly directly into one of the constructs and disappear. The Devourer's sensors showed that the ship had been destroyed, but then energy readings suggested it was still there, somehow existing inside the construct's own structure. "Major," her pilot said, "the phase variance is working. We're actually inside their hull." Major KO looked at the readings. The damaged engine wasn't just creating false images, it was shifting her ship slightly out of normal space. They were existing in the same location as the Devourer construct, but in a different dimensional phase. Fire quantum torpedoes. Point blank range. The explosion tore the construct apart from the inside. The Devourers had never experienced an attack that came from within their own structure. Their logical systems couldn't process how it was possible, but even as they celebrated the victory, Major KO knew it was temporary. The Devourers would adapt to this tactic too. They always did. Meanwhile, on Earth, Dr. Young-Soo Nam was working on something that might change everything. In the underground laboratory beneath Seoul, he had built the first quantum dispersal cannon. "Dr. Han," he called to his assistant, "are the power systems ready?" Dr. Biora Han checked her instruments. "All of Seoul's power grid is connected to the cannon. We're also drawing from the nuclear plants in Bezin and Ulsan. When we fire this thing, half of Korea will go dark. And it will only work once," Dr. Nam said. "After that, the power requirements will burn out most of our electrical systems." They were preparing to test the weapon on a Devourer harvesting platform near Mars. If it worked, the cannon might give humanity its first real victory. If it failed, they would have wasted months of work and billions of dollars. "Sir," a technician reported, "we're getting readings from the Mars battle. Major KOS squadron is engaging the enemy." Dr. Nam watched the tactical display. The human ships were fighting brilliantly, using every trick they had learned, but there were too many Devourers. Even with Ghost Protocol, the humans were losing. "Fire the cannon," he ordered. The quantum dispersal cannon drew power from across half the Korean peninsula. Every light in Seoul flickered and went out. Nuclear reactors strained to provide the massive energy requirements. A beam of twisted space-time reached across millions of kilometers in an instant. When it hit the Devourer harvesting platform near Mars, something unprecedented happened. The platform didn't just explode. The quantum energy created a chain reaction that spread to other Devourer constructs nearby. 12 separate enemy machines were destroyed or damaged by a single shot, but the most important effect was psychological. For the first time, the Devourers pulled back their forces. Not just one damaged construct, but an entire battle group retreated to a safe distance. "They're scared," Dr. Han whispered. "No," Dr. Nam corrected. "They're thinking. They're trying to figure out how we did something that should be impossible." Far from Earth, on the edge of the solar system, Captain Jiwoo Lee was also making the Devourers think. She had spent months hiding in the asteroid belt, studying enemy patterns and developing new tactics. Her ship, the Bison Rising, now looked nothing like it had originally. Lee and her crew had built what they called confusion platforms, fake ship sections that could separate from the main vessel and move independently. When Devour scouts found her, they saw what appeared to be a normal human patrol ship. But when they attacked, the ship broke apart into dozens of pieces that all moved in different directions. Some pieces exploded, others fired weapons. A few simply disappeared. The Devourers couldn't tell which pieces were real and which were decoys. Their logical systems tried to track all the fragments, causing computational overload. While they were confused, Lee's real ship escaped to set up the same trick somewhere else. "Captain," her communications officer said, "we're getting signals from other human ships. They want to know how we're doing this." "Record a message," Lee replied. "Tell them the secret is to make the enemy think too hard. Devourers are machines. If you give a machine too many contradictory inputs, it freezes up while trying to process everything." What Lee didn't know was that her message was being intercepted by alien ships fleeing toward Andromeda. The Vorthek Admiral Keschel was monitoring human communications out of curiosity. "Sir," his aide reported, "the humans are actually winning some battles." Keschel studied the reports with growing amazement. "How is this possible? We had the most advanced fleet in the galaxy and we were crushed. The humans are using tactics that make no logical sense, sir. They deliberately damage their own ships. They ram enemy constructs. They fire weapons that are more dangerous to themselves than to the enemy. That is insane, yes, sir, but it's working." Keschel stared at the tactical displays. His own people had fled without a fight because logic dictated that resistance was futile. But these primitive humans were proving that logic had its limitations. "Sir," his aide continued, "some of our fleet commanders are asking if we should help them." "Help them?" "That would require returning to a war zone." "Yes, sir. But the humans are showing us something we never considered. Maybe the Devourers can be beaten if we stop thinking like them." Keschel was quiet for a long time. His crystalline form sparkled with internal light as he processed this new information back in the solar system. Admiral Haiwan Zhang was coordinating the defense from a command ship hidden behind Neptune. Reports were coming in from battles across the system, and the news was both good and bad. Good. Human forces were winning individual battles through sheer unpredictability. Bad. More Devourer constructs were arriving every day, and they were learning from each defeat. "Admiral," Dr. Sujin Park reported, "I've been analyzing the Devourer adaptation patterns. They're starting to develop counters to our chaos tactics. How long before they adapt completely?" "Maybe 6 months, maybe less. They're learning to be more random themselves, which reduces the effectiveness of our unpredictability." Admiral Zhang looked at the strategic display. Earth was surrounded by Devourer forces, but humanity was still fighting. Still confusing the enemy, still refusing to give up. "Doctor, do you think we can actually win this war?" Dr. Park thought for a moment. "I think we can do something better than winning." "What's that?" "We can teach the galaxy that sometimes the impossible is just another word for difficult on Earth." President Minho Choi was preparing another broadcast to the world. Outside his window, the lights of Seoul were slowly coming back on after the cannon test. In the distance, he could see construction crews working on more quantum weapons. "My fellow humans," he would tell them, 6 months ago, the galaxy abandoned us because they thought we were weak. Today, we proved that weakness can be strength if you use it correctly." He paused, thinking about the reports from the front lines. Ordinary people doing extraordinary things. Teachers flying warships, engineers building impossible weapons, farmers ramming their cargo ships into alien machines just to make a point. "We may not be the strongest species in the galaxy," he continued. "We may not be the smartest, but we are the most stubborn, and apparently that's enough." General Kyung-ho Lee pressed his back against the ruined wall and listened to the sound of metal feet marching through the streets of Bizen. 1 year had passed since the Galaxy abandoned humanity, and now the Devourers had finally reached Earth. The invasion had started 3 days ago when Devourer infiltrator units, machines, the size of cars but shaped like spiders, had landed in major cities around the world. They were supposed to scout and disable human defenses before the main fleet arrived. Instead, they had walked into the strangest war in galactic history. "General," Sergeant Bo Young Kim whispered, "there's a patrol coming this way. 3 infiltrators." "General." Lee nodded. He was Captain Jiwoo Lee's father, and he had spent his entire career preparing for conventional warfare. Tank battles, airstrikes, naval engagements. He had never expected to fight building-sized robot spiders in the ruins of his own city, but then again, nothing about this war had been conventional. "Remember the plan," he told his squad. "These things think logically. They expect us to run away or set up defensive positions, so we're going to do neither." The infiltrators rounded the corner, 3 massive machines covered in sensors and weapons. Their logical systems immediately began analyzing the area, looking for the most efficient way to clear out any human resistance. What they found instead was General Lee's squad doing something that made no sense at all. The humans were having a picnic. Sergeant Kim was actually eating a sandwich. Private Woojin Park was playing cards with 2 other soldiers. General Lee himself was reading a book and completely ignoring the approaching war machines, the infiltrators. Stopped. Their logical systems tried to process what they were seeing. Were the humans surrendering? Were they too frightened to move? Was this some kind of trap? While the machines stood frozen, trying to understand the situation, human soldiers hidden in the surrounding buildings opened fire with quantum disruption weapons. The infiltrators were destroyed before they could react. "That's the 14th patrol this week," Sergeant Kim said, putting away her sandwich. "How many more do you think they'll send?" "As many as it takes," General Lee replied. "But each one that stops to figure out what we're doing is one that isn't reporting back to the main force." This was the new reality of ground combat. The Devourers had expected human cities to be defended with walls and bunkers and military formations. Instead, they found resistance fighters who did things like having tea parties in the middle of battle zones, playing music loudly to confuse enemy sensors, and setting up fake movie theaters that projected confusing images. The machines' logical systems were overloading, trying to process human behavior that made no sense. Meanwhile, in space, Dr. Beorahan was putting the finishing touches on humanity's greatest gamble. In the hidden laboratory beneath Seoul, she had built something that shouldn't exist, the Paradox Engine. "Dr. Nam," she called to her colleague, "the quantum field generators are stable. But I still think this is going to kill us all." "Dr. Young-soo." Nam checked the readings one more time. "Maybe, but if it works, it will give us something the Devourers have never faced before." The Paradox Engine was the logical conclusion of human chaos theory. Instead of just making weapons unpredictable, it would create zones where the normal rules of reality simply didn't apply. Inside these zones, biological intuition would be more powerful than machine logic. "The first test zone will cover most of the Pacific Ocean," Dr. Han continued. "Any Devourer construct that enters will find itself in a place where cause and effect don't work properly. And any human ships will have to rely on gut instinct instead of instruments, which, considering how humans fight, might actually be an advantage." Above them, the real war was reaching its climax. Admiral Haiwan Jang commanded the remaining human fleet from her flagship, hidden in the shadow of Saturn's rings. She had fewer than 1,000 ships left, but they were all crewed by veterans who had learned to fight like no other species in galactic history. "Admiral," her communications officer reported, "we're receiving a transmission from outside the system. It's from the Vorthak fleet." Admiral Jang frowned. "The Vorthak? They should be halfway to Andromeda by now." The main screen flickered, showing the crystalline face of Admiral Keschel. Behind him, Jang could see what looked like a Vorthak command bridge, but something was different. The normally orderly alien ship seemed chaotic, with crew members moving in random patterns. "Admiral Jang," Keschel said, "I bring greetings from the Vorthak Defense Force." "Defense Force?" I thought you were evacuating. We were, Cashel admitted, but we have been monitoring your battles. We have seen things that should be impossible. Humans defeating devourers through sheer randomness. Jang raised an eyebrow. And we wish to learn. Our orderly tactics failed completely against the devourers. But your chaotic methods are succeeding. We request mission to fight alongside you. You want to learn human tactics? We want to learn how to be unpredictable, Cashel said. Our crystalline nature makes us very logical. But we have discovered that our ship can be reprogrammed to introduce random elements. We have been practicing chaos. Admiral Jang almost smiled. Show me. The screen switched to an external view of the Vorthic fleet. Instead of their usual perfect formations, the crystal ships were flying in patterns that looked completely insane. Some spun as they moved. Others changed direction every few seconds. A few were flying upside down for no apparent reason. It feels wrong to us, Cashel admitted. Every instinct tells us this is inefficient. But if it helps us fight the devours. Welcome to the war, Admiral Jang said, but the real surprise came when more transmissions arrived. The energy-based Luminari had learned to flicker in and out of existence randomly. The cybernetic Nexari had modified their programming to include creative chaos protocols. Even species that had never spoken to humans before were requesting to learn human-style warfare. Dr. Sujin Park, monitoring the communications from Earth, made a startling discovery. Admiral, she reported, the other species aren't just copying our tactics, they're improving them. The Vorthak can create random crystal formations that confuse devour sensors. The Luminari can become unpredictable energy patterns. They're taking our chaos and making it work with their own abilities. How effective are they? Early reports suggest very effective. The Devourers have spent millions of years learning to fight logical opponents. They have no programming for dealing with illogical ones. The first joint operation began when Captain Min Jae Lee led a mixed human Vorthak fleet against a major Devourer staging area near Jupiter. The combination was devastating. Human unpredictability created chaos, while Vorthak firepower exploited the confusion. The Devourers, for the first time in their existence, were completely outmatched. Their logical systems couldn't process fleets that combined random, human tactics with alien technology. But the most important change was happening in the minds of the fleeing aliens. Species that had run from the Devourers in terror were suddenly learning that the machines could be beaten. Hope, which had been dead for months, began to return. Admiral Jang, Dr. Park reported, we're receiving volunteer requests from 17 different species. They all want to join the fight. Can we coordinate that many different fighting styles? I don't think we need to coordinate them, Dr. Park said with a grin. I think we need to make them as uncoordinated as possible. On Earth, President Min Ho Choi was preparing for what might be his final broadcast. The Devourer main fleet was approaching, and despite all their victories, humanity was still outnumbered by millions to one. But as he looked at the reports coming in from across the galaxy, he realized something had changed. Humanity had done more than just survive. They had taught the galaxy that running away wasn't the only option. My fellow humans, he began, 1 year ago we were abandoned by those who called themselves our allies. They said we were too weak, too primitive, too small to matter. He paused, looking at images of human and alien ships fighting side by side against the Devourers. Today, those same species are asking us to teach them how to fight. Not because we are strong, but because we refuse to give up. Not because we are smart, but because we learn to be unpredictable. Outside his window, Sol's lights twinkled in the darkness. In orbit above, ships from dozens of different species prepared for the final battle. We may not survive what's coming, President Choi continued, but we have already won something more important than our lives. We have won back the galaxy's courage. Captain Jiwoo Lee, returning from her long mission in deep space, received the message as her ship approached Earth. She had spent months gathering intelligence on Devourer weaknesses. And what she had learned would change everything. Prepare. For quantum link transmission, she ordered her crew. It's time to show the galaxy the Devourer's greatest secret. The final battle was about to begin, and humanity had one last surprise for their enemies. Captain Ji Woo Lee stood on the bridge of the Bison Rising as Earth grew larger on the screen. 2 years had passed since the galaxy abandoned humanity, and now she was returning with information that would change everything. Captain, her communications officer said, Admiral Zhang is requesting immediate contact. Put her through. Admiral Zhang's face appeared on the screen, but she looked different, older, more tired, but also somehow stronger. Captain Lee, thank the stars you're alive. We need your intelligence report immediately. The final Devourer fleet is approaching Earth, and we have maybe 6 hours before they arrive. Admiral, what I learned changes everything, Lee said. The Devourers aren't what we think they are. Explain. I spend months following them, studying their behavior. I watched them consume 17 different civilizations, and I noticed something. They're not destroying these species out of hatred or hunger. They're trying to solve a problem. Admiral Zhang frowned. What kind of problem? The problem of existence itself. The Devourers are ancient machines created by a species that died billions of years ago. Their original programming was to find the perfect way to exist. No conflict. No waste, no chaos. They've been consuming other civilizations to gather data, trying to create a perfect universe where everything makes logical sense. Dr. Sujin Park, who had been listening, stepped forward. So they're not evil, they're just confused. Exactly, Lee said. They can't understand why biological species create art or love or music. To them, these things are inefficient. But they keep finding them in every civilization they consume, so they keep trying to figure out what they're missing. That's fascinating, Admiral Zhang said, but how does it help us? They're still trying to kill us all. Because I think we can offer them something they've never encountered before. Instead of being consumed by them, we can teach them. On Earth below, Dr. Bio Rahan was making final preparations for the Paradox engine. The massive device had been built under the Pacific Ocean, where it could affect the largest possible area. Dr. Nam, she called, the quantum field generators are ready. Once we activate this, there will be a zone covering half the Pacific where normal physics doesn't work properly. And that will help us how? Dr. Nam asked. Because inside that zone, intuition becomes more powerful than logic. Human thinking becomes an advantage, not a weakness. Above them, the largest fleet in galactic history was assembling. Ships from 43 different species had come to defend Earth, not because they were ordered to, but because humanity had taught them that fighting impossible odds was sometimes the right thing to do. Admiral Keshal of the Vorthik commanded a wing of crystal ships that had learned to fly in chaotic patterns. Commander Zilmuth of the Luminari-led energy beings, who could now shift randomly between dimensions. Even the machine-based Nexari had modified themselves to include creative randomness in their programming. This is Admiral Zhang to all ships, came the broadcast. The Devourer main fleet consists of over 10,000 constructs. We have approximately 3,000 ships of various classes. By every logical measure, we cannot win this battle. She paused. Fortunately, logic has never been humanity's strong point. All ships, prepare for Operation Last Hope. The Devourer fleet emerged from hyperspace like a plague of metal locusts. Their constructs were massive, some the size of moons, others as large as planets. They had learned from every battle, adapted to every human tactic. They were perfect logical machines, which was exactly the problem. Activate the Paradox engine, Admiral Zhang ordered, deep beneath the Pacific Ocean. Dr. Han pressed the activation switch. The Paradox engine drew power from every nuclear reactor on Earth, every solar panel, every power source humanity could provide. A bubble of twisted space-time expanded outward from Earth, covering millions of cubic kilometers inside this zone. The normal rules of reality became flexible. The Devourer constructs entered the zone and immediately began experiencing problems. Their sensors reported contradictory data. Their weapons fired in directions that didn't exist. Their logical systems tried to process information that changed every time they looked at it, but the Allied fleet, guided by biological intuition, rather than computer logic, moved through the chaos like fish through water. "All ships, begin the teaching protocol," Admiral Zhang ordered. What happened next had never occurred in galactic history. Instead of trying to destroy the Devourer constructs, the Allied ships began broadcasting directly into their communication. Networks. Not threats, not demands, but questions. "Why do you think art is inefficient?" Captain Min-jae Lee asked as his ship danced around a massive construct. "What do you think love actually accomplishes?" Dr. Park transmitted from her research vessel. "If perfect logic is the goal, why do you feel the need to consume others to achieve it?" Captain Lee added from the Bizen Rising, the Devourers had never been asked questions before. Every other species had either submitted or fought. But humans were doing something unprecedented. They were trying to have a conversation in the middle of a battle. The massive constructs slowed their attacks, not because they were damaged, but because they were thinking. For the first time in billions of years, they were processing ideas that didn't fit into their logical framework. "We seek perfection," came the reply, transmitted on frequencies that hurt to hear. "We seek a universe without waste, without chaos, without the inefficiencies of biological emotion." "But why?" Dr. Park asked. "Who told you that was better?" There was a long pause. Deep within the Devourer collective consciousness, ancient programming struggled with a question no one had ever asked before. Our creators, they died from chaos, from war, from the inefficiencies of biological existence. We were programmed to prevent such waste. "But they also created you," Captain Lee pointed out. "Chaos and war and biological existence created the intelligence that became you. Without those inefficiencies, you wouldn't exist." The battle had stopped. Thousands of ships from dozens of species floated in space while machines older than most stars tried to process a logical paradox. "We do not understand," the Devourers finally transmitted. "That's the point," Admiral Zhang said, her voice broadcast across the entire fleet. "Understanding isn't the goal. Experience is. You've been trying to solve the puzzle of existence by eliminating all the interesting pieces, but chaos leads to suffering. Sometimes," President Min-ho Choi added, joining the conversation from Earth, "but chaos also leads to music and love and the courage to fight impossible battles. You've been so focused on preventing suffering that you've eliminated joy as well." Deep in the quantum realm, something unprecedented was happening. The Devourer collective consciousness, enhanced by billions of years of consumed knowledge, was experiencing something new, doubt. For the first time, they wondered if their creators had been wrong. If perfection through elimination was actually a form of death. If the chaos they had been trying to destroy was actually the source of everything meaningful in the universe. We do not know how to be imperfect," they finally admitted. "That's okay," Dr. Han transmitted from her laboratory. "Neither do we. That's why it's called learning. But if we stop consuming civilizations, if we stop trying to create perfection, what do?" Captain Lee smiled. "You help us rebuild what was lost. You learn to appreciate the beautiful mess that is existence. You discover that being alive is better than being perfect. And if we make mistakes, then you'll be just like the rest of us," Admiral Zhang said. "Confused, imperfect, and absolutely amazing." The transformation didn't happen instantly. It took months of patient teaching, of showing the Devourers how to appreciate art and music and the simple pleasure of doing something for no logical reason. Some constructs chose to remain as they were, but many began to change. They started creating instead of consuming. They began asking questions instead of following programming. They learned to value diversity over uniformity. The galaxy was rebuilt, but it was different now. The rigid hierarchies that had existed for millennia were replaced by loose confederations of species who shared ideas instead of competing for resources. Humanity, once the youngest and weakest species, became teachers and mediators, not because They were perfect. But because they understood something fundamental, strength comes not from avoiding failure, but from the courage to keep trying, despite it. President Min-ho Choi stood in his office 5 years later, looking out at a Seoul that sparkled with lights from human and alien architecture mixed together. In the harbor, ships from dozens of species worked together on projects that would have been impossible before the war. "Sir," his aide said, "the Galactic Council is requesting to relocate to Earth. They say they want to learn more about chaotic cooperation." Min-ho smiled. "Tell them they're welcome, but warn them that things might get a little unpredictable around here." "Sir, that's the point," he said. "We've taught the galaxy that being abandoned can teach you the most important lesson of all. When you have nothing left to lose, you discover what you're truly capable of." Outside his window, a Devourer construct was working with human engineers to build a new type of space station. The ancient machine was learning to appreciate the inefficient beauty of trial and error. Above them all, the stars shined with new promise. The galaxy had Lee,